All right, this is a brief tutorial on how to use Musecore for your improvisation and composition work. So when you first start Musecore up, you're going to see this start center, this wizard, and we're going to create a new score. When we create a new score, this wizard pops up, and we're going to put in our score name. In this case, we are going to select Poly. I'm going to put in my name, the date, copyright, okay. Now I have to choose an instrument that I want to use for this score. For making a lead sheet, which is the first step in using Musecore, I'm going to use treble clef. Treble clef is the clef that we're most familiar with. It's typically what you see when you are given a lead sheet. It's going to be in treble clef unless you're a bass player. I'm going to go to next. Okay, here we have different key signatures. In general, with a lead sheet, I'm going to choose C major, just because, for convenience sake, it's easy to have a nice clean image with no key signature at the beginning, especially if I'm just putting in chords and slash notation. Although, if you know the key signature for the song that you're composing or improvising, you can put it in now. So I'm going to go next. All right, now we have to deal with time and tempo. So in general, we're going to want to stick with 4/4. It's the majority of the music that's played and the kinds of music we've been working on. We can ignore pickup measure for now. It has to do with a specific type of melodic phrase or melodic contour. 32 measures is a good place to start. We can always delete or add more measures later. One thing that I want to do is I want to turn the tempo on. It just sets a tempo for me. Now I can always change this later if I decide that I want a different tempo. For this particular song, I know that I actually want 120 beats per minute, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that. But I like to have the tempo selected because, again, it sets the playback of my score to this specific tempo. All right, so I now have my awesome new composition. And what you'll notice is that there are 32 measures. I'm zooming in. There are 32 measures. They're all empty right now because I have no music. I put that I wanted my tempo to be 120 beats per minute, so it's indicating that here. Now this is a connected piece of text, meaning that this text actually has MIDI capabilities attached to it. And as you'll discover in Musecore, much of what you input into this has MIDI connected capabilities. So when I'm typically making a lead sheet, the first thing I'm going to do is fill my measures with slash notation. Because for the most part, when I'm making lead sheets, I'm not super concerned about rhythm. If I am, I might indicate it, but for right now, we're just going to go ahead and fill this with slash notation. So what I did was I control selected all of my measures, and I went up to Tools, and I went to Fill with Slashes. Now you notice I have this nice slash notation filling out my entire chart right now, which is great. Okay, now another thing I like to do, it's just for my own visual clarity, is I like to demark the systems in groups of 4 measures. Now, if a song has a 5-measure phrase or something like that, maybe I would change this. But in general, because most music is based in 4 and 8 measures, it makes sense to just kind of break this up in that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this measure, and I'm going to hit Enter. And you notice it automatically creates this system break right here. Okay? So I'm going to go through and I'm going to continue to do that every 4 measures. I need to make sure that I select the measure and not one of these individual slashes. I select the measure and hit Enter. I get another system break after 4 measures. I'm going to come down here and do it again. 4 measures. I'm going to come down here and do it again. 4 measures. I'm going to go through the whole piece of music and just partition it in 4-measure groupings. Now I've got my entire 32 measures partitioned into 4-measure groupings. You can see there is a system break at the end of each one of these systems. And at the end, Musecore has been so kind as to automatically put a double bar line in there, which just indicates the end of a piece of music. Now, if I decide to shorten this later, that double bar line is automatically going to go back to wherever the end of the piece of music is. Okay, so we discovered that we want to work on this chord progression we're calling poly, and it's a 4-chord progression, and the chords change every 2 beats or every 2 slashes. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert a chord here. Now, one way I can insert a chord is I can select this slash, I can go up to add, and I can add text because a chord is represented by text on a chart like this. And I'm going to go down to chord symbol, and now it creates a little box for me to put a chord symbol in. And the first chord in poly is going to be E minor. Great. Now I have a couple options. I can press spacebar, and that's going to move me to the next beat in the measure, in this case the next slash. I could also press tab, which takes me automatically to the beginning of the next measure. Or I could click another one of these slashes, and I can go back up to add, text, chord symbol. And this next chord is a G chord, a G major chord. Now again, I can press spacebar, spacebar again, and now I can add my next chord, which is a D chord. And I can press tab, but that's going to take me to the next measure, and I need to put my chord in here in this third beat. So I'm going to select this slash, this third beat, and this time instead of going up to add text, I'm actually just going to press Control K. I'm going to press the hotkey Control K, and that's going to give me the chord box. Okay, now I'm going to put it in my C major chord, which is my 4th chord. And I'm going to do that a couple more times just to practice. So I'm going to press the first slash in this measure, and I'm going to press Control K, and I'm going to type in E minor. And I'm going to press the next slash. I'm going to type in Control K, and I'm going to put in a G. And the next slash, Control K, that's a D chord. Next slash, Control K, that's a C chord. Okay, or I could do Control K, E minor, space, space, G, space, space, D, space, space, C, space, space, E minor, space, space, G, space, space, D, space, space, C. Or I could highlight all 8 of these measures, shift clicking to highlight all of them, and copy. I can either right click and copy, or I can press Control C as is standard. And I can paste this in the next 8 measures. It's automatically going to fill it in. And I can paste in the next 8 measures again. And I can paste it in the next 8 measures. And now I've filled my entire chord progression with these chords. And if I listen, I'll hear it. Notice that this is in time, right? This is aligned with the 120 beats per minute that we established at the beginning. If I want to listen to that timing, I'm going to press spacebar to stop. I can come up here to this transport window and select the metronome. And this tells me to play the metronome during playback. Now if I go back to the beginning of the piece and press spacebar, or press the play button in the transport, now I'm going to hear it, but this time I hear the clicking of the metronome. So I'm going to hear the chords being played, but I'm also going to hear the clicking of the metronome. So that can be nice if you want to hear how the syncopation or the time correlates with the overall beat. I'm going to turn it off right now. All right, so now what I have is this 32 measure chart of this song. My new awesome new and awesome and original and unique composition, poly. So I have all these chords, but I want to add a bass line, okay? And I've written a bass line on the guitar. So I want to bring in a guitar into this score so that I can add some parts from the guitar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here to Edit, and I'm going to go to Instruments. And when I do that, I have a pop-up window. It's opening my other monitor right here. And now I'm going to go to Strings, Plucked, because I play a guitar. And I'm going to select Acoustic Guitar Tablature. Why not? And you know what? I'm going to add an acoustic guitar standard notation as well. And I want to change the order of that. A lot of times you'll see standard notation above tablature. So I'm going to put the tablature at the very bottom. All right. And I've added this instrument. This is great. So I have my acoustic guitar that I've written my bass line on. And notice that the spreadsheet, this document has spread out into 2 pages now, and that's because it's automatically adjusting for all the additional instrumentation that I've just added. Okay, so I know that my bass line, I've written it out on the guitar. I know it's the open low E string. So what I'm going to do to add that note is I'm going to go up to this bar right here, which is all my notes, and I want to play a half note because I want this note to take up the duration of 2 beats. So I select a half note, and notice how it automatically turns on my notation. This just puts me in notation mode, meaning I can now start inputting notes. So I'm going to go down to the tab. I want to put a low open E string, so I'm going to put this half note on my low E string. I click it, and it's already there. It's already on the open string. It just automatically defaults to 0. If I want to change the fret, I press a different number on my keyboard. I can press 1, 2 for 12. I can press 2 for 2, 3 for 3, 4 for 4, 1, 4 for 14. But I want it to be 0 because I'm starting with the open string. Great. Now I'm going to add another bass note. I'm going to add the G on the 3rd beat. This defaults to my open string, so I'm going to press 3 because that's the note G. Now I want to play the D on my A string, so I'm going to put this note on my A string. It defaults to the open string, but I want to play D, and that's the 5th fret. And then finally I'm going to add the C, that's the 3rd fret on my A string. So now I have my bass line notated in the way that I played it on an acoustic guitar. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to highlight both of these measures, and I'm going to copy, by pressing Control C, I'm going to copy and paste this phrase into standard notation. This is just so I can see in standard notation what's going on in the acoustic guitar part. It can be interesting, it can be useful, and if you read standard notation, this would be the way I would advise you going about doing this. Okay, and for now I'm going to get rid of that. In fact, I'm going to get rid of this acoustic guitar part altogether. I don't really need it. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce a bass part. So I'm going to go up to Edit, I'm going to go back to Instruments, I'm going to delete this acoustic guitar, the part that's not tablature. I select it and click Remove from Score. And now I'm going to come down here and I'm going to select Electric Bass, and I'm going to add this to Score. I'm going to create a bass line. So my original idea that I improvised on guitar was a bass line, but I played it on guitar. So what I want to do is copy and paste this idea into the bass. So I've Shift selected both of these measures, and now I'm going to Control C, copy it, and paste it. Now you notice that this bass line, it should be identical in the tablature, but it's not. It's an octave higher. And so what I need to do is I need to transpose this line. I need to change where it's played on the instrument. So I'm going to click both of those measures, select them. I'm going to go up to Tools, and I'm going to go to Transpose, one of my favorite tools. I click Transpose, and this window opens up. I select by interval. I want to move this whole thing, this whole phrase down an octave. So I'm going to move down a perfect octave. And now look, I now have the same bass line that I had on the guitar. The only difference is that in this case, the bass line on the guitar, we've notated on the 5th fret of the A string, but here it's playing it as the open D string. To change that, all I have to do is drag this open down to the 5th fret. And now I have the exact same tablature for the bass. Okay? Well, since this is a bass line, I don't actually need my acoustic guitar tablature anymore, so I'm going to go back up to Edit. I'm going to select Instruments. I'm going to select my acoustic guitar tablature, and I'm going to remove it from the score. Now I just have the piano playing these chords every 2 beats in the bass line. I'm going to select both of these measures, copy and paste them, and I'm going to do this through half of the score. So I'm going to copy and paste this whole system for 16 measures. Now, for the next 16 measures, I want to create a different bass line. I'm going to play, instead of having it play a half note and a half note, I'm going to play a quarter note followed by 2 eighth notes. And we'll hear what that bass rhythm sounds like. So right now we've got this. Okay, let's change up this bass line for the second half. Come back down to my tablature. Now what I want to do is I want to add a quarter note. Great. Select quarter note and make sure that my notation is selected. And I'm going to put a quarter note here, and that's my open string. Now I want to have a quarter note followed by 2 eighth notes. Remember, 2 eighth notes take up the space of 1 quarter note. So I have this new rhythmic figure, and I'm going to adjust accordingly for each of my new chords. I'm just changing back and forth between quarter notes and eighth notes, making sure I change each note as I go. I'm using my keyboard to do that. Alright, and now I have this new bass line. Right, and that sounds very different. It's got a different feel to it. So I'm going to copy and paste this bass line. And oops. And now I have a bass line for the rest of my song. It's following the same chord progression, but it's a little bit different. And I just varied it rhythmically. So let's listen to the two comparatively. It's funny because I can't actually hear this. Alright, so now I have these two sections. If I want to clarify it for myself, it can be helpful to select a measure, come down here to text in my toolbar, and I can click this B1 button, which is a rehearsal mark. It's going to create, oops, I did that for the whole measure. I don't want to do that. I just want to do it for one bar, one beat. So I have this A. Now I'm going to come down for one beat, the first beat of this next section. I'm going to double click, it automatically turns into a B. Now I have an A and a B section. Sweet. For my awesome new composition, Poly. Now from here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to export this file. First, I'm going to export it as a PDF. When I do that, this window pops up, and I want to export the full score. So I just hit export, and it's going to come up in my Documents, Musecore, Scores folder. So I'm going to do that. And then I also want to export this file as an MP3. And I'm going to put that in the same folder. And last but not least, it's going to take a moment to export it because it needs to change my MIDI into audio. Great. And last but not least, I'm going to export this as a MIDI file. And when I export it as a MIDI file, I want to expand my repeats, meaning I want it to play through all of the repeats. All right, and now I have a MIDI file, I have an MP3, and I have a PDF of this composition, all of which are ready to use and import into my DAW.